Welcome back, everybody, to another Uncomfortable. I'm Kirk, joined by Vince. In today's episode, we'll be talking about human expectation versus godly vision. Our scripture theme today will be Isaiah 55, 8 through 9. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are my ways your ways, declares the Lord. Now, Vince, in what way do you see in your classes today how your students seem to have incorrect expectations because they're looking at things through their own eyes versus God's perception?
Wow, that's a really great question. And it's not until you were talking about what the what the topic was for today, because I know I was the one that suggested it on the last show, but um when you just now said it, all of a sudden just hit me how daunting of a task it is to try to talk about this specific thing, because we're all so guilty of it, you know what I mean? But it's I think the issue that you run into is, and I remember doing this in Bible school too, is, God starts sharing vision for your life and things with you and sharing identity with you about yourself and all that stuff. And so you begin to set up these images in your head of what life is going to look like and things are going to happen. And there's nothing wrong with it, but we, instead of saying, okay, well, maybe this is me and not God, we just go with, well, I wouldn't be getting these ideas if it wasn't God.
Well, that's a dangerous way to look at it.
So we set up these expectations, and when they're not met, we blame God, or even worse, when they're not met, it triggers trauma from our childhood, which then puts us uh, at odds with God, saying, well, see, it proves I can't trust God. He's just like my dad, he's just like my mom, he's just like so and so or whatever, and just like all of them, he just ran out on me and didn't meet this expectation of this vision he gave me. When the vision, listen, a vision of what God has for your life has so many layers to it and looks nothing like what we think it looks like. What our way and our way of thinking and doing to get to the top of an organization, let's just use that for an example, is typically one way. You climb the corporate ladder, right? You learn different things in different departments, you put yourself out there, you become needed and trusted and usable and all of that stuff. And you might have to even step on a few people's fingers and toes to get up that ladder. And hopefully not enough. That way, if you do fall down, somebody might catch you on the way down. But let's say you make it to the top. Okay, great. And you can kind of sort of plan roughly a certain way that certain things have to go to get there. Like an example is, if you are going to become a police officer, there's typically a line of process to do that, right? People will go to college, they'll take criminology if they want to be a detective or even a lawyer or something like that, and they they'll go to the police academy, and there's all these steps that they'll take and all that stuff like that. The difference is God's asking us to trust him with our life and say, my vision for you is this. And he'll share little bits and pieces with you here and there. But what you go through to get there might look different literally for every person. So you could have five people stand in the room and God calls all five of them to pastor a church, and not one of them go through the same road to get there. And they might not even reach the same people. You might have one person that's in a more affluent neighborhood, whereas the other person is in the hood, where someone else typically only ministers to people who are in jail. They go and minister in jail every week. They don't have a congregation outside of that. And so the experiences that you go through and the things that you do and what you learn to prepare you for that is different. Not that the same principles aren't used, the same biblical principles aren't used, but the experiences that you go through in life are different. So We can't place our expectations of, well, here's God's 5-step program to get me into this position. All right, well, maybe God wants you to be a CEO, but maybe he wants you to be a janitor first.
Well, I think
So
one of the
that,
biggest problems is we get stuck up, and I don't know who the quote came from, but I heard a quote once that says, "We don't just want the what, we want the how, when, and the why."
oh,
And
I'm guilty of that.
I mean, but this reality right there, because we want to control, and we want control and predictability in everything.
That's
And
the key word, control.
yeah, and the problem is God doesn't operate in control to where he's like, Kirk, Vince, y'all can have full control of what's going on. He's like, I want you to do this and trust me. And when it's time for the next step, I will tell you. And the best example I know, and I heard this story of these folks that when they were out on this mission trip, and these folks, and I don't even remember what part of the world they were in, but they were going on a hike at night. And they all had flashlights, and they were instructed to keep the flashlight in front of you and only step on the spot directly in front of you. Well, as they were taking him on this hike, going 1 foot at a time, one step at a time, they made it up to this point. And the guide said, okay, stand still, and we're about to watch the sunrise. Well, when the sun rose, they watched the sunrise from the peak of a mountain. And he goes, okay, it's now time for us to return back. And everyone was like, how do we get down? There's no path. He goes, we're going back the same way we came. And they're like, we can't. There's nowhere to go. And he goes, yes, you can. One step at a time. Exactly the step that I take. And the thing is if they had seen the impossible task that they had at hand, they never would have attempted to climb that summit to see the sunrise from that point, because they would have been too fearful of where they were going. There's many times in our lives that we ourselves would refuse to go where God's asking us to go, because the task he's asking us to do is so large that we refuse to move because we're fearful of the unknown, the unpredictability of how we're going to get paid, the inability to control the outcomes that could happen in this endeavor. But if we just trust him and take the steps as he asks us to take them, he will lead us in a path to get us to where we need to go so that we can accomplish what we've been assigned to do. But we refuse to move forward because of the lack of control and predictability. But if we would just be like those folks being led in the dark, keeping our eyes only on those marks where Holy Spirit is highlighting for us and not letting fear, doubt, or the need for self-control to be in there, we would get moved into the next stage of our life, our ministry, our business, whatever, because God's called each one of us to something special, but we just have to have the faith to pursue him with all that we are. Some of us might even just be called to be a deacon or an usher or, a businessman. Not everybody's called to be a preacher. Actually, I would say there's very few called to be preachers compared to people that are called to be in the church. Because the preachers, and I'm going to meddle in some people's business here, preachers in the fivefold ministry are called to equip the saints for the work of the gospel, not only to do the work of the gospel. And that's where the American church has it wrong. The church as a whole is supposed to be winning the world for Christ, not the fivefold ministry. The fivefold ministry is a part of that vision, a part of that work, but they're not the sole proprietors of it. Their goal is to equip the saints to go and win the nations. Their goal is to try to work themselves out of a job. And so this ultra competitive, I need to outdo XYZ pastor or minister down the road should be a thing of the past. Our goal is not for that. Our goal is to equip the saints to do the work of the gospel, even if it means we have no job at the end of the day. Because if we have no job at the end of the day, we can stand before the King of Kings of the universe and say, we have done everything we could do, and he will say, well done. And that is what we should be chasing after. It shouldn't matter what anybody else thinks about us. As long as we are standing before the King of Kings and he says, well done, my good and faithful servant, that is exactly what we should be choosing to do. We should be pursuing with all of our heart, with all of our mind, to equip the saints for the work of the gospel so that they have the tools they need, not only to win their neighbor to the Lord, but so that they can live a successful life, and so that the scripture can be fulfilled that says that my people will be known for the love that they have for one another. Oh man, I'm meddling now.
That's pretty rough.
But that's the reality of it. You know, we are supposed to look beyond ourselves, trust the Lord, and not let ourselves get stuck because of fear of losing control of our ministry, of our church, of our family, of our job. Fill in the blank, whatever it is you're dealing with. Right? Because the Lord wants you to step out in faith so that he can exchange, just like I talked about in the last show. If you didn't hear the example, I'm not going to tell you the example so that you have to go back and listen to it. But he's trying to exchange some gift for a better gift with you. But you're going to have to do some letting go. Otherwise, you can't get the bigger gift. God's view is eternal. Often our view seems urgent, but it's not an eternal situation on our side. But for God, when he's trying to get us to go somewhere, it has eternal consequences. You know, it's not only affecting you normally. It normally affects at least 5 or 10 other people, if not thousands. Because God expects each one of us to touch other lives. And those people have the other people that they're expecting to touch. And he expects us to operate as a body. And the body is made up of many members. Those members are hands, feet, mouth, tongue, heart, lungs, liver, many pieces that aren't even seen but are extremely important and critical to keep the system working. But they have to work in harmony with one another to function well. The right foot and the left foot can't run in opposite directions. Otherwise, they'll literally go nowhere. So we have to learn to work as a symphony together in love so that we can reach the world for the King of Kings and so that we can proclaim his word so that people can be saved. Man, I've gotten on a soapbox today. I didn't even mean to get into this topic.
Yeah, you did, but it was necessary to kind of head down that road. Um, I think with that, the next best thing to probably do is, or the next thing that I would lead to talk about is let's look at some real examples from the Bible. Um, Moses Moses ran. I mean, when he killed the Egyptian, he probably thought, well, maybe that's the way that it needs to happen. Maybe that's how I get the Israelites free,
He's like, I'm
is
going to
through
throw
that,
down, man. I'm going to use some of these
right?
special moves that I learned in
Because
the,
he was already a warrior. He's
yeah, in
already
the
a
king's
soldier, right?
courts. Yeah.
hmm So, but it didn't. He went and ran to the desert, spent 40 years in the desert. So he didn't fight when he was 40. He went back when he was 80 years old,
You know, it's almost like God said, you got to unlearn what you learned.
right? That's true. And so he's 80 years old and he goes back to Egypt to bring freedom to the people. And then he spends another 40 years with them to bring them to the brink of the promised land, in which God gives him the ability to look at, but he's not allowed to enter because of, some bad decisions.
Oh, yeah.
But I mean, so look at that. One of the biggest ones that should be pretty obvious to us is the whole thing about the Messiah with Jesus. When At the point in history when Jesus showed up, their understanding of the Messiah was that he was coming to set up the kingdom, like the kingdom, like King David, the kingdom, bigger, better. Nobody would be able to mess with them. He would be the Messiah, the sent one, right?
That's right.
And and so their way of thinking was this physical, natural kingdom. And Jesus came in and he flipped the script on them and said, no, 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 no. Hold on. Mine's going to be a spiritual kingdom. I'm going to reestablish the spiritual kingdom on the earth, not just in Israel.
Oh, yeah.
So when you look at it, and that was God's vision was a spiritual kingdom where that affected the natural, and we were looking at human expectations was a physical kingdom that threw off the yoke and the bondage of some more superior nation that was over you. Whereas through Christianity, through following Christ, it still threw off the nation because it doesn't matter what nation you're under, it doesn't matter what political system you're under, you have the ability to affect change and change entire nations and areas in short spans of time through prayer and through attacking things in the spirit realm, right?
Oh yeah.
So I think one of the things that helps us with all of that, I mean, we talked about Joseph even the last episode. I mean, he didn't have the expectation to have to go to prison and all that stuff, but ended up becoming the prime minister in a moment's notice. Well, not necessarily prime minister, but basically the second in charge. Um, but we have to understand that we have to come to a place of recognition and figuring out, is this what God truly has as his vision for me, or is this just my expectations?
There you go, buddy.
I mean, it's I I hesitate to say certain things not because I don't think they need to be said, but just because I don't want to mix certain things with other stuff and be like, well, he said this, but this. I mean, look, it's normal. It's totally normal for us to have an expectation for a situation. Humans as a whole, I believe we don't tend to like the unknown.
Oh, absolutely.
Like there's the aspect of the unknown where like, oh yeah, it's really cool to do something you don't know, surprise this, surprise that. But I'd venture to say by and large, there's a majority of people that don't like the unknown. They like to be able to have some sort of control, right? Again, going back to that word control. But when God is laying that out, we have to be able to look at those expectations and go, okay, am I willing to submit those? Am I willing to just like I like the example of like this. Are you willing to hold those tight with your fist closed before God? Are you willing to hold them with your hands open so that if he wants to take them and replace them with something else, he can? And using that story, I think you said it last time, or maybe it was this time, about uh Jesus with the teddy bear behind his back.
Oh, you gave everybody the example from last show.
Ah, sorry.
Right.
You should still go back and listen to it because it still gives you context. But looking at it from a different perspective, maybe he's got a hold of one of the arms and he's just waiting for the child to let go of it. Whereas if it was just sitting there and in the palm of her hand, he could pick it up, take it away, and put the new one in
Think
the
about
other
this.
hand.
Disappointment is often the doorway to transformation. You know, the disappointment of
Could
that
be.
child letting go of that teddy bear is
Yeah.
the doorway to the transportation, or excuse me, the transformation
Nice.
that she's going to go through when she gets the joy of receiving the larger teddy bear.
True, but in the moment we don't necessarily know that. And the other aspect is it doesn't always come when we want it to come.
Right. But
That
that's
teddy
the
bear might,
reality of it being the disappointment, being the doorway to the transformation. We don't know what the transformation is going to be. But when you allow the disappointment and say, Lord, I see this situation that I'm going through. I give it to you. This is the brokenness that I'm experiencing through it. This is the disruption that I have through it. This is the heartache or whatever, right? I just yield this thing to you and I give it all up to you. I let go of this relationship you've asked me to let go of. You know, I let go of this job that you've asked me to let go of or whatever it is. And you just trust God. Then you give permission for him to move on your behalf. But many times, because we refuse to let go, we're actually refusing permission for his blessing to enter our life. Think about that.
I mean, it's very true. That makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
I mean, not a lot more sense than what I'm saying. It's just different stuff, but it does make sense.
How many
Uh,
times has our faith been built up in uncertain moments?
yeah, I mean, that's true. It's Again, going back to a word that we've used at least two or three times already, control.
Absolutely.
And it really does come down in that sense. I mean, if you put it human expectations versus God's vision, you would have to also add in there control versus surrender.
Absolutely. And so when we let go of control, what we think should happen, that allows us to walk into what the Lord, is doing.
See, now I think we're really starting to get into a place of meddling deep in that spot that nobody likes to let anybody into.
Mm-hmm.
Because I can tell, I can feel it like tingling in me, like, man, I don't want to dive into there. Because I still have my own issues with control versus surrender, just like we all do. So, right, our expectations or our control is we want to be able to have enough information, at least, even if we're trying to be humble. We want enough information so that we can't be blindsided, so that we can kind of hopefully logically figure out the outcome or generally which way it's going to fall, whether I'm going to get this or not get this, it's going to go this way or that way. Whereas when we surrender, we're truly saying, God, I trust you. I trust your decision making. I trust that you know the path ahead of time. Even when those things come and sideswipe us that we're not aware of, you're not shocked by that. It wasn't like, oh no. He's like, yeah, I knew that was coming. I knew the bridge was going to get took out. That's why I built the bridge down the way. But oh yeah, by the way, you have to go down the road to get to the next bridge.
You know, the word says that faith without action is dead, right?
Right?
So if we're not taking action, we're not doing something about it, our faith has no real substance.
Hmm.
Now, perfect example. My family and I, we were living in Tennessee. All of a sudden, I'm driving down the road for work, and I feel this prompting that I haven't felt in a long time. And it's the Lord prompting me to move back to Texas. And,
Bet you loved that one, didn't you?
oh, I didn't. At that point in my life, I had zero good feelings about Texas. I had actually told the Lord I wasn't coming back.
Oh, you know.
And I was very happy living close to my family in Tennessee, around all my close friends, my family. And I felt this very strong push. I started talking to my wife. She's like, I said, pray about it. So she began to pray about it. She's like, okay. I said, okay, we need another confirmation. I went and talked to my pastor, and he supported me. And I told the Lord, I said, Lord, I said, you know, I have a wife and kids. I said, if you're wanting me to move to Texas, I need you to make provision for my family. So I put action into my faith, and I began to submit applications to different jobs
What?
in Texas. Yeah.
You didn't just show up and be like, hire me
Yeah.
somewhere?
I mean, I actually sent applications out before I moved. And all of a sudden, the next thing I know, I have 3 offers. I had 2 companies offering me, plus the company I worked for offering me a job. And
Wow.
I'm like, wow, Lord, okay. And then what they were offering me was way more than I needed to move over here. So I was like, okay, Lord, I feel like you're showing out here. You're basically saying my hand is on this, my thumbprint is on this.
Mm.
Get moving, Kirk. And I shared with my wife, and she was like, okay, I feel like this is what the Lord wants. And so we quickly got everything in line and we moved. Faith without works is dead. If you're asking the Lord to give you a car, and all you're doing is praying about it every night, but you're never going and getting, well, I'm going to say the want ads. That goes to show my age, I guess, because I still remember as a teenager getting the want ads. But anymore, if you're not good on Auto Trader or,
You're
you
getting
know,
old, Kirk. You're getting
whatever
old.
your car guru or whatever it is you're looking at anymore, or Facebook Marketplace or whatever your favorite jam is to look for your new vehicle.
Hmm.
You know, if you're not going and looking for the vehicle, but you're asking God every night for one, how do you expect to ever get a vehicle? Right? You're not even putting
Actually,
any kind of action behind it.
I can actually speak specifically to that. When we were in need of a vehicle, we knew ours uh was on its last leg. We actually we actually went before the Lord and we talked about it together and said, okay, what kind of vehicle we do want? Do we want a van? Do we want a car? Do we want a SUV? What do we want? What do we want the inside? What do we want the outside to look like? Do those things matter and all that stuff like that? And to the things that mattered, we put that in our prayer and petition before the Lord. And to the things that didn't, we're like, whatever. So when we had an opportunity and it was presented to us, there was a vehicle that we got a call about out of the blue. Well, then there was a check that showed up at our house within a couple of days after this offer was given to us that had a postmark on the letter 3 days before the offer was ever given to us.
Oh, wow.
And we're like, um,
How did this happen, Lord?
all right, cool. So it's like you said, submitting it to the Lord and going before Him in prayer. I honestly I couldn't even come up with an expectation like that to happen. There's no
Absolutely.
way I could have figured out how that would have went down. So I would have to say, if you're struggling with, and I know we're coming up on our time here, if you're struggling with allowing your expectations to try to lead and guide you in your own vision instead of the Lord's, and you're having a hard time surrendering, maybe there's some other work that you need to do in your life as well.
Absolutely.
Maybe there's some deep hurts, some pain that you need to begin to explore and open up to the Lord so that He can heal them, and other traumas and dramas and things like that can help bring healing and bring wholeness so that it's easier for you to come to a place where you can trust Him. It's easier for you to yield to that vision He has versus your vision or expectations for your life.
Oh, absolutely. And guys, remember, God's no is not just normally just a no or not yet. It's often setting you up for a greater yes that aligns with His purpose.
Hmm.
It just may not be the yes you're expecting, or you may not even be able to see the yes because of the current no you're saying. But when you finally surrender and you go through the healing or the process or whatever it is, and all of a sudden your vision is restored, then you'll be able to see what the yes is that's coming up ahead of you. You know, remember, God's vision rarely will fit into your comfort zone. He tends to stretch us in a way that will mold and refine us. Think about that. He wants to stretch you so that He can mold and refine you into the image that He's created you to be. Remember, He's the potter and you're the clay.
Hmm.
He's the one that forms you into the vessel that He knows you're going to be best used as. Many times when you feel lost and you think your expectations are falling apart and crumbling apart, that's exactly where you need to be so that God's vision can begin in your life. Because now He has a place where He can begin to work if you'll just allow Him access and you'll give Him the time and the presence so that He can begin to mold and rearrange things in your life. Stay in the tension. Even when it's uncomfortable, remember you can put yourself by faith in Him to be on holy ground.
That's solid. I I just have to go back to the point of choose to choose to yield. It's so much better in the yielding. It's not always easy, and a lot of times it hurts.
That's it. Well,
But
guys, we want to thank you for getting uncomfortable with us. You know, we really look forward to seeing you here with us next time. We also invite you to email us a story about how you yourself had to trust God through the tension. Do that at uncomfortable@mooseministries.org. Send us your show ideas. And you can also go to mooseministries.org/give to support us there as well. Guys, God bless you. Talk to you next time.
see y'all next time.